Now we're going to hear from Jeremy Hawkins from the University of Glasgow for a research exchange at Delft University of Technology, Netherlands. Jeremy, you can start when you're ready.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see that okay? Great, thanks.
Yes, that's right.
I have 15 slides for 15 minutes. This is kind of going to be more of an account of the work in progress and what has been accomplished. But my title, Written Space, Literary Tools for Spatial Design, is an attempt to kind of try to bring together the different things that have happened in the last few months that I've been working on my exchange with the TU Delft. So just very briefly, I'm going to say my thesis project and creative writing at the University of Glasgow is called Spatial Poetics. The working title is Spatial Poetics, Situated Writing Practices and Knowledge Production in Design Contexts. And the idea is to investigate through practice-based methods how we can create knowledge around spatial design through the use of creative writing practices, specifically poetic practices, when we take into account situatedness and related themes. This has been evolving very quickly. I'm in the second year, finishing the second year of a part-time thesis. So it's kind of both going slowly and quickly at the same time, which is exciting and not at the same time. I had the great opportunity to do this exchange with TU Delft at the Faculty of Architecture in the Built Environment, and specifically with the Chair of Methods of Analysis and Imagination. Don't worry, it's not your screens. For some reason, I really wanted every picture to be kind of a little washed out. That's my fault. This institution, in terms of architectural research and pedagogy, is one of the best in the world. And this opportunity to work with them has been a kind of key pivot point in my thinking for a lot of reasons. You can just look at the types of facilities they have for students on the right. And I've been to several schools of architecture in Europe, and I've never seen anything like it in terms of the resources that are available, but also the ways in which people are thinking and using those resources. So it's really exciting to be at a place where so much is happening. And specifically at the Chair of Methods of Analysis and Imagination, which for me is particularly exciting because they have over 15 years of experience of bringing literary or creative writing methods into thinking about architectural design. Professor Klaska Havik has kind of led the way on thinking about specifically how these disciplines can work together in terms of kind of feeding our thought about how writing and design can work together. There have definitely been precedents in terms of thinking about the writing process and design, and a few kind of notable examples before this happened at Delft. At the same time, a program that is both pedagogical and research oriented, that's housed in an institution like this, it's more or less unheard of. And so having an opportunity to see how this started from kind of very modest terms, a few student seminars where a wild question was posed, such as what happens if we ask the students to write rather than to draw, or what happens if we ask the students to compose a piece of fiction rather than create a building. These types of questions were being posed pretty much before anyone else was doing it in Europe. And so it was really exciting to be able to ask about how this came about. And so part of the work I've been doing is just having conversations with Professor Havik, which has been really, really rewarding. At the same time, I've had access to their archives. This is some of the archives that are available there. There's more, including digital archives, but it's been really interesting to see kind of what types of texts they've been drawing on, how students have been responding to the work, how it has allowed them to study individual cities like Bogota, how it's led to the development of an academic journal. So this is really privileged access, partially because these materials have built up over 15 years without necessarily being digitized, without being inventoried in any way, and with most people who interact with the chair not knowing that they really exist. So it's really a privileged opportunity to look at these materials and get a sense for essentially what has been done at TU Delft, and in a certain sense to know what's been happening in Europe as more and more researchers have sought to collaborate with Delft as a kind of central point for this type of thinking. So my work on kind of trying to determine what this archive really represents is very much in progress. There's a lot of material. It doesn't maybe look impressive for people who spend a lot of time in archives, but for a poet, which is what I am, this is plenty of material to work with. At the same time, I was able to engage in some field work, specifically working with some of the team in the chair of methods of analysis and imagination and some of their master's students. So here we have some examples of students writing in space, which in itself, it's not necessarily something new, but one of the things that's been exciting about it is to be able to test certain ideas about how we can create methods that are transposable, appropriable by people trying to use creative writing approaches to study and understand space, to build knowledge about our public environments. And so I won't go into details about the exact exercises, though sometimes it's everything as, from as simple as notice the trivial and the unimportant to trying to describe things without naming them. It's a variety of approaches, and what I'm really trying to do is build up a kind of extensive catalog of simple but powerful ways of approaching writing space that can be applied by anyone. I also was able to do a little bit of my own field work, particularly interested in water landscapes. It was really, really excellent to be able to meet Fred in Amsterdam, and we had a coffee on a boat that was, of course, attached to the quayside on the canal, but kind of trying to understand the water landscape of the Netherlands has been particularly interesting for me as a basis for practice research. Understanding, of course, in air quotes, because I'm approaching it with an attempt to try and understand it through situated, poetic, and subjective knowledges. But here are just a few examples of some of the documents that I have been collecting from my time in Delft. At the same time, one of the most powerful things for me about this exchange is that currently TU Delft and the Chair of Methods have been piloting a major research network, which is the Cost Action Writing Urban Places. For those of you who don't know Cost Actions, they are EU-funded research programs where the main deliverable is the network itself, and the network is usually oriented around a theme or a research question. In this case, it's about writing urban places in mid-sized European cities. And so we have over 200 researchers from over 30 countries, including Australia, and over 100 public and private schools and institutions associated. So by working with Delft, I was also able to join this network in a kind of very, I want to say, efficient way. I don't know how to say it better than that. But this was right away my entry into this network, which was really powerful. On the one hand, it allowed me to participate in an international doctoral workshop in Osijek, Croatia. Osijek. For those of you who are Croatian, I'll try to say it better. Osijek. Urban Chronicles and Imperial Context, in which there was a study of the literary landscape of the city through particular writers who had tracked kind of the urban phenomena of the city, especially in the late 19th century. So it was interesting to kind of see it from more of a literary and literary geography kind of approach to studying the city, even though I'm more interested in how creative writing practices can influence design. It's still a way of thinking about knowledge production in terms of urban space. And at the same time, it allowed me to interact with a pretty diverse and really interesting group of doctoral students from across Europe who are coming from all sorts of related disciplines. So this was really interesting and useful. I was also able to be a leader in an international fieldwork session in Tampere, Finland, which is called Narrating Hidden Ranta, Stories of Objects and Subjects of Urban Places. Here's some of the shots, some images from the site where we were working, which is a former industrial site that has been bought by the city and given over to local actors, associations, and NGOs. And there's everything from a DIY skate park to small entrepreneurs making artisanal products. And in the lower right-hand corner, you have a sauna that was built by local activists and students that is free and open to the public. So we were working here, and I was able to give, first of all, a keynote lecture to the assembled researchers. We had 20 participants from across Europe. And so I gave a presentation on poetic practices that could be used while we were on site to study the space and to try and get a sense of the urban or the spatial practices that had given meaning to this site since it became a place invested by local activists. At the same time, I was able to run some events that created new approaches to understanding the site. So this was, I called it a deambulating exploration of site. It was a midnight daylight poetics session where participants and local activists together traversed the site while reading texts that spoke to their understanding of the site or their kind of bodily feelings at that time. I want to say something intellectual about it, but at the same time, the thing I really want to say was that it was just awesome, which may not sound so intellectual, but I was actually really struck by this event because we had people, I think we had something like 12 different native languages being performed in a kind of spontaneous way as we crossed the site in this really unique ambiance of being in daylight at midnight in this space just before midsummer. It was something that really created a sense of shared community after just one day together, and also really changed our relationships to the site, even those who essentially live there. It changed in kind of immeasurable ways. On the one hand, I want to say appartenance in French to the group, and also understandings of how the site could be lived and practiced. A few forthcoming publications that have come from this exchange. One is 2 methods, which will be in a repository of methods being published by the Cost Action, both based on situated writing in urban spaces, drawing from avant-garde poetic traditions, one kind of a Pereckian approach to exhausting place, the other one about using community collage techniques in order to create group texts. And actually, we did this activity together when I gave my keynote speech in Tampere. We actually wrote a group text which captured, in that moment, the bodies on site of the participants and the activists who were there. And there's also a creative publication based on landscape poetics that's coming out this summer with Opt West, which I'm happy about. If I could say that. And essentially, I want to say thank you to Saixa and to you for listening. I think everybody here actually already has my contact information, but there it is. Thanks.